I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion on a Thursday, and we got through that hump day. Wow, what a day that was yesterday. Absolutely an explosive day to the upside. We talked about what are some of the factors that influence the markets each and every day, and there can be so many to choose from these days, but the reopening of the economy certainly did dominate yesterday, and that's what really started to drive, it seemed like, the entire market to the upside, although the NASDAQ was lagging most of the day, but a huge move in the markets yesterday. So it accelerated all the way into the closing bell, by the way. But when you finish it all up and you take a look at what's really driving things, and we've talked about this for a while, what kind of leadership are we getting? What kind of rotation are we getting? And I'll give you a couple examples. Financials have really been the backbone of the recent rallies that we have seen in the marketplace. And we've talked about some of this rotation from some of the other names, the Power Five, some of the NASDAQ names, all the rest of it. But that's become much more of a daily type thing. But we're starting to see just more than a day, several days putting back to back together and starting to see some of these financials move to the upside. And that's been an impressive thing to watch. About 3.5% yesterday higher when you look at the XLF. Now you look at the industrial space, wow, on fire yesterday, powered by Boeing. Boeing, absolutely explosive move yesterday, up about 13%. By the way, it's following up yesterday's move today again. So it's really been something that's been spectacular to watch. But also some great participation in other names, Raytheon, Caterpillar. So it's gotten a little bit more diverse. It's not just defense. The semiconductors, they were up about 3%. You can take your pick, but I'll pick Micron, which has been a name that has been, it popped, it pulled back a little bit. Everybody was wondering, well, why is it pulling back? Because it made a pretty significant pop. Now it's starting to move closer and closer to those highs where the pop was, and maybe it can extend past that, because that's been something to watch as well. KLEC 10 Core, that's one of these names you don't talk about a lot, you don't hear about it a lot. Lam Research, another one. So a little bit of rotation even within the semiconductors in terms of where that leadership's coming from. Then you look over at the oil services. And I brought this up yesterday on the halftime report because I think it's very important. It's if you dig down a little bit more, I think part of the problem, I don't want to say it's laziness, but people are just kind of going and following each other around in terms of where some of these pockets are that have shown a little bit more strength over time. Oil, we've talked about that big power move from 17 to 36. That's been something to watch. And what are some of the names that are really starting to move along with that? Obviously, we know the Chevrons and the Exxons and some of those big names, but it's those secondary names as well. So I look over at the service sector, and that, again, up about 3% yesterday. Yeah, energy, again, was up about 3%. You're looking at Exxon and Chevron and those kind of names. The Dow, really pretty interesting. Up 1% early, then moved even further upon that, up about 2%, 500 plus points, well over 26,000 in the Dow. So that all just sort of pushed the entire day to the upside. The NASDAQ finally got pulled along as well. Didn't do nearly as well, but up about 0.8% yesterday. So a pretty decent day, almost a 1% move out of that as well. S&P moved up a little bit more than 1%. So that was something. The volatility index, this is something we brought up. Now, Tom Lee was talking about if we can get towards 20, and of course, if we can get towards 20, yes, people are going to feel a lot more comfortable about these markets, because the increased volatility has a lot of people definitely feeling some of that pressure. This is where we live. This is what we love. We love seeing this kind of volatility. Now, when you get up into the 80s, makes it a little bit more difficult. You get down towards the 50s, gets a lot easier. You get towards the 30s, a heck of a lot easier and a lot more fun. And then all of a sudden now we're starting to kind of get back down towards almost normal levels a little bit closer anyways. So yesterday finished around 26 on the volatility index. You had airlines, you had cruise ships, you had hotels, all of those very strong yesterday. Now the strongest mechanism of all of the different things that fit into the market, the volume yesterday. I talked about starting off June and how disappointed I was with Monday and Tuesday. Well, holy smokes, we made up for it big time yesterday. We traded nearly 34 million contracts yesterday. Nearly 34 million contracts, just barely under that number. So a really big day once again, getting to see what's going on in the derivatives markets. And I can tell you, we were absolutely flooded with unusual option activity. We talked about it coming into the day, how just an hour or two into the day, we already had all kinds of different option opportunities out there. Wow, did that explode throughout the rest of the day? By the way, Boeing, are you kidding me? That stock yesterday, when it started off, they were buying those calls and they were paying a little over $1 for those. If you, even when you were paying up a little bit for the very short-term calls, mind you, very, very short-term, those exploded. They were the 165s. I'll give you a small idea. I just got to pull it up just because I want to see exactly where it is right now. Boeing, 184. They were buying the 165s when the stock was trading 158. 158. And now it's trading 184. What an explosive move. So the 65 calls are worth about $20 today after yesterday being $1 to $1.50, somewhere in that sort of range. Unbelievable explosive move that we're seeing right now out of Boeing. I mean, it's just something like you do not see very often. So this morning, we were actually down fairly significantly early, down 100 plus points, giving back some. That makes some sense. You get these huge moves to the upside. You kind of almost expect a little bit of a pullback. Well, we had that pullback lasted the blink of an eye. First of all, in the pre-market, we actually spiked back up, got into positive territory, and then we're fluttering around a little bit because the ECB and the pandemic purchase program that they were addressing with huge, much bigger number than anybody expected. And because of that, there was some sentiment. Markets moved a little bit higher. They pushed back down. That didn't last terribly long. But as we get into today, you're looking at the markets and you look and suddenly you start to see a couple of things. Now, markets down, call it, let's say 100 points early on. But you look over at biotech and you see that trading in positive territory. You see a couple other green shoots, if you want to call it that are starting to move towards positive territory. And then the markets really started to pick up and started to run. And in terms of the Dow, it was Boeing, it was Intel, it was Dow, formerly Dow Chemical. People get mad about that. JP Morgan, all of these different things. Financials. I just mentioned JP Morgan. These financials, what an explosive move. And again, putting it again back to back to back. So the broad group right now, early on, moving up about 1%. You look across, you look at JP Morgan, you look at Citi, you look at Bank of America, Wells Fargo, definitely moving to the upside, Goldman Sachs. All of those up about 1% or more early on. So we're only barely an hour into the trading day, and we're seeing some pretty substantial moves out of the markets. So what else? We talk about airlines all the time. I mentioned yesterday we had great participation in the airlines, the hotels, the casinos. That was all part of the day. Well, today, airlines moving again higher. You've got Southwest, you got American, you got all these various names, and cruise ships and hotels, not seeing quite as much of that today. Maybe we will, but early on, not nearly as much as we were seeing yesterday on that huge market rally to the upside. So talk about airlines. We're going to hit one for unusual option activity. So the one I decided to pick out today was Southwest, because Southwest has been a pretty interesting move out of what we've seen in the stock price of Southwest. So with the stock trading about 37.5, a little bit higher, 37.60, got a pretty interesting trade here. So I'll give you some of the mechanics, but first I'll give you the trade. So the July 42.5 calls were bought. Not huge. About 2,500 of these were bought, around $1.35. Now, again, the stock's trading around 37.60. There is a lot of different elements that go into what's going on, as I said, mechanics, but the elements that go into this trade. So somebody who had a successful trade buying the July 40s, they're selling out of those July 40s. They're moving up. They're buying now the July 42.5s. That's a very disciplined thing, in my opinion. So they're buying the July 42.5s, taking money off the table, still want to be in the trade. Oh, and they're going to reduce some of their risk because they're selling the upside, selling the July 50 calls. So this all sort of adds up to an interesting and a very smart trade, in my opinion, of how they're approaching, how they moved into this so that they can keep this at a much more tolerant risk levels for where they want to be positioned right now. Not expecting a monstrous explosive move up through 50, because that's why they sold the 50s, but expecting this move to continue to the upside. And if it doesn't, you've got a little less risk on the table because they're moving from the 40s to the 42.5. So yes, again, they were buying those July 42.5 calls. Guys, I got the bull shirt on today. Why? The market has been this bullish freak show of a market ripping to the upside. My guys over at the Minnesotan, if you want to, if you can, if you want to support these guys, this is just one of the many golf shirts. They got hats, they got t-shirts, all this great stuff. And these guys are giving a chunk of what they do in sales to the Lyme Foundation that my wife founded. So Twin Cities Lyme. It's really a really important cause. We just finished the month of May, which is Lyme Disease Awareness Month. Really, really critical. We've had so many other things going on, obviously, that it makes it even difficult to find something else out there. Everybody's looking for something, but this is a very important thing. People don't really always understand in the springtime and all the rest of it. And I love my guys at the Minnesotan. They just put out quality stuff, really cool stuff, actually. This golf shirt is awesome. I was just over at the Minnesotan yesterday. They're wide open. They did really well during the pandemic. They had a great e-commerce business. They put some stuff out on the street so people could go buy and all the rest of that stuff, just doing everything they could to survive. Small businesses, we all watched how difficult this has been with the small business environment. And those that can survive, they've got to have that e-commerce presence. They do. So check out theminnesotan.com. It's definitely worth it. Cool stuff. Folks, have a great day of trading. Market Rebellion, we're here to educate. Hopefully, if you're not understanding options as well as you'd like, the derivatives markets as well as you like, we have great educators. If you do, check out the unusual option activity. We are seeing crazy stuff. It's been fantastic. Have a great day of trading.